Well, Toronto home prices fell for a second consecutive month as the average price dropped 0.8% in September, as, of course, higher mortgage costs pushed buyers out of the market. We're joined now by Jason Mercer. He's with the Toronto Regional Real Estate Board. Jason, thank you for coming in.
Morning.
I think viewers may see in some of the media reporting some distinction as to whether prices rose or fall in Toronto in the most recent period. Put that in context to us. What happened?
I mean, we report on a couple different metrics. We look at year-over-year change, and we're seeing the average selling price up a little bit in comparison to the same period last year. But certainly over the last couple of months, we've seen a little bit more supply in the marketplace. And so if you look at that seasonally adjusted figure on a month-over-month basis, we've actually seen things trend a little bit lower. And I think that makes sense. I mean, buyers out there that are still active in the marketplace have a little bit more negotiating power given the supply situation versus sales. And so we've seen prices sort of flatline to edge a little bit lower over the last couple of months.
And the TRREB says the short and medium term outlook for the GTA housing market are very different. Put that in context for us.
Yeah, I mean, if you think in the short term, and both of you were talking about it earlier in your segment, where there is certainly some uncertainty out there, whether you're talking about borrowing costs or the direction of the economy or the direction of the labor market. So I think a lot of people who have every intention of purchasing a home at some point in the future are certainly on the sidelines right now because they're taking a wait-and-see attitude. What's going to happen with borrowing costs, say 6 months to a year down the road? What's going to happen with the economy, with inflation, and what have you? But I think more in the medium-term outlook, you're thinking about record levels of population growth and what have you. All these people are going to require a place to live. It's a tight rental market out there right now, and very quickly, if sales start to turn around, you'd see a tight ownership market as well, because even though listings are up relative to last year, they're still relatively low from an historic perspective.
So, Jason, even though home prices are down consecutively for a number of months, they're still up year over year.
Right.
Are sellers being realistic with their offerings? Are they coming to market based on prices last year, even though interest rates have gone up? People are worried that the economy is going to soften. I mean, what will spur the home prices from there?
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you kind of go through a scenario, and I even think, like, say, between the first quarter and second quarter of this year, there's some expectation out there that we may even see interest rate cuts later in 2023. That was 6 months ago. People were thinking that way, and you actually saw a pretty quick uptick in the marketplace. And then obviously the scenario changed. And so I think on the selling side, there's also been uncertainty as well. So you come to the market at a certain price, you don't get a lot of bites, and so you have to sort of change your expectations. And I think to a certain degree, we're still working through that right now. And so, off the top, we were talking about more supply in the marketplace and giving buyers a little bit more negotiating power. I think sellers will have to come to terms with that.
First-time home buyers often settle or often look for, not settle, but look for condominiums for obvious reasons. But condo prices are also have moved higher. $700,000 is now the average price of a condo. TRREB is encouraging the city of Toronto to make a change to its land transfer tax threshold. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, every year when we do our consumer polling, we find that 40 to 50% of intending buyers are going to be first-time buyers, and it makes sense. We see again a lot of population growth in the city of Toronto, and a lot of these people eventually find their way into the ownership market. The issue is that threshold for the exemption to the land transfer tax hasn't moved in a decade and a half. It still sits at $400,000. Well, in the city of Toronto, even in the condo market, which is comparatively lower price, it's pretty difficult to find a home at that level. So all we're saying is that if you're moving the threshold at the top end, you should also be taking a look at the bottom end. It's first-time buyers that are hit hardest when you're talking about affordability. They don't have as much equity, they don't have as much savings built up, and what have you.
What about, I thought I heard that there'd be an increase in the land transfer tax, or thinking about it for luxury homes.
Right.
How is that going to, is that going to be coming in 2024, and is that going to really impact the housing market in Toronto?
I mean, it's at the margin. I mean, certainly when you're thinking about a $3 million home in the city of Toronto, it sounds expensive. It is expensive, but it's all relative. I mean, if you have someone sort of moving through the market, they originally bought a condo, then a semi, then a detached, and they've built up that equity over time, that could prompt some of those people to remain in the home that they're in, and then you don't see that sort of filtering effect through the market. You see less supply coming online. I think at the margin, it's still a relatively small part of the pie versus what you're seeing at the other side of the market, which is why we're saying if you're looking at raising that threshold in the luxury side of the market, you ought to also be looking at first-time buyers.
Jason, you have to be bullish long-term on the Toronto housing market. You have an aging population and you have a population growth coming. Interest rates are obviously affecting things right now, but give us maybe your medium-term thoughts on the housing market.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about overall housing demand, and that's whether we're talking about ownership housing or rental housing, demand is going to remain strong, and it's going to continue to increase as we see household growth. My greatest concern is not on the demand side, it's on the supply side. So right now, I mean, the GTA is Canada's single greatest beneficiary of immigration. It's key for economic development and growth moving forward. My concern is that if people start to say, look, I'd love to move to the Toronto area, but I'm afraid I'm not going to be able to find a home that's affordable, I might start to look elsewhere, and that could be the detriment not only to the GTA but Canada more broadly.
Is it possible for home supply to keep up with population growth these days?
I mean, the issue is that it hasn't been keeping up over the last decade, and so we need to see an increase in construction just to offset the deficit that's built up over the last 10 years, and then we're also seeing sort of record levels of growth. Again, we need population growth for our economy to grow, but at the same time, we got to find a way to house it.
Are you seeing any what you would think are positive steps from the provincial and federal governments on this? We've recently, of course, had an enormous controversy and a step back on the Greenbelt.
If we were having this discussion 5 years ago, people would be accusing me from some quarters of sort of throwing out the supply argument as a bit of a red herring. I think now, if you talk to all levels of government, there's the firm realization that housing supply is an issue and something needs to be done. I think what we haven't seen a lot of yet is actually shovels hitting the ground and seeing a real uptick in home construction, and that'll be the challenge over the next few years.